TrueStory Vibes warmly welcomes all our beloved listeners. We're so glad to see you again in our familiar time slot.
Today,
TrueStory Vibes brings you a brand new story, one that we hope will touch your heart and stay with you. As you listen, feel free to leave a comment sharing the quote or moment that left the deepest impression on you. Wishing you a wonderful and meaningful listening experience. Riley Stone grips the steering wheel as she eases her rental car down Maplewood Lane, her heart thudding like a drum in her chest. Morning light filters through towering pines, casting dappled patterns across the winding road. She's been looking forward to this day and dreading it for weeks. Today she meets Mason Carter's mother, Denise Carter, for the very first time. And she's 5 months pregnant. Green Valley feels impossibly quiet as Riley's GPS guides her to a neatly painted craftsman-style house perched on a slight hill. Boxwood hedges flank a stone walkway leading to an emerald green front door. Riley steels herself before stepping out, smoothing her soft gray cardigan over the tailored blouse she selected this morning. She glances down at her growing bump and exhales. This isn't just any meeting, it's the moment her future, and her child's, could be rewritten forever. She rings the bell. The door swings open to reveal Denise Carter, arms folded under a navy sweater, her silver-tinged hair pulled into a tight chignon. Denise's blue eyes narrow. "You must be Riley," she says, voice cool as mountain air. Riley forces a smile. "Yes, good morning, Miss Carter.
thank you for having me.
Denise lets the door linger open just long enough for Riley to step inside. The foyer is immaculate. Polished oak floors gleam. A Persian runner stretches the length of the hall. And wind chimes tinkle softly at the window. Denise stands motionless, as if assessing every detail. Riley hands over a gift bag, 3 locally made lavender-scented candles, wrapped in tissue paper. Denise peeks inside, wrinkles her nose, and places it on a marble console table. "Come have a seat," Denise says, nodding toward a living room furnished with stiff sofas and glass coffee tables. Mason emerges from a side hallway, looking relieved to see Riley. He wraps her in a quick hug. "Hey, babe," he whispers. Riley leans into him, grateful for his warmth. He releases her and offers his arm. "Mom, Riley would like to sit," he says, trying a gentle smile at his mother. Denise makes a soft clicking sound in her throat. Riley perches on the edge of a love seat, careful not to brush her bump against the rigid cushion. Denise sits directly opposite, legs crossed at the knee, lips pressed into a thin line. Mason takes the seat between them, his gentle presence a small island in a sea of tension. Silence hangs heavy until Denise clears her throat. "So, Riley, tell me about your background." Riley's throat tightens. She summons a composed tone. "I graduated from Portland State last year, with a degree in communications. I work as an administrative assistant at Clover and Reed Publishing in town." Denise lifts an eyebrow. "Nothing more impressive?" She tilts her head, as if waiting for more. Riley swallows. "I've been putting in overtime to support our health insurance and save for the baby's arrival." Denise's lips curl into a faint smirk. "Your parents must be proud." Riley volunteers. "My mom teaches 2nd grade in Salem, and my dad runs a small auto repair shop." Denise gives a soft, mocking laugh. "So, an educator and a grease monkey." Riley's cheeks warm under the appraisal. She meets Denise's gaze. "They're hardworking. We're very close." With a single sniff, Denise turns toward Mason. "And you," she says, "how long have you two been together?" Mason settles forward, hands resting on his knees.
3 years, Mom.
"We've built a stable life. I handle the warehouse management at Carter Freight, and Riley's income helps with our rent and savings." Denise's gaze flicks back to Riley. "Warehouse management? Publishing assistant? Tell me, Riley, how do you plan to juggle motherhood and your so-called career?" Her tone drips skepticism. Riley's pulse quickens, but she responds evenly. "I've arranged a flexible schedule with my supervisor. I plan to work part-time after the baby arrives, and Mason's income can cover most expenses." Denise's eyes narrow. Is he comfortable with that? A man's role is to provide. Mason straightens. Yes, Mom. We discussed it. This works for us. Denise's lips purse. She reaches for a coaster and taps it against the coffee table. I expect our grandchild to grow up knowing excellence. Green Valley is a small town, Riley. Reputation matters. Bloodlines matter. Her gaze bores into Riley. You understand that? Riley nods.
Ida.
I want nothing more than to be the best mother I can be. Denise leans back, arms crossing again. We'll see. An awkward silence follows. A grandfather clock chimes 10 times. Mason exhales and stands. Mom, I promised to help Riley with her car seat installation. Shall we head out to the porch? Denise hesitates, glances at Riley, then nods curtly. As they walk toward the front door, Riley feels the full weight of the morning pressing on her. But she refuses to let it break her. Outside, the kettle whines softly on a porch stove as Denise brews chamomile tea. Mason helps Riley buckle the infant carrier into the back seat. Denise steps onto the porch, teacup in hand, surveying the valley beyond. She turns to Riley. I'll be watching, she says, voice low. Don't disappoint me. Riley's heart pounds, but she squares her shoulders. I won't. As the car pulls away down Maplewood Lane, Riley exhales a shaky breath. The Carter household has made its expectations clear. But Riley Stone is nothing if not determined, and she will do whatever it takes to show them she's worthy of both their son's love and their grandchild's future. Riley sat at her kitchen island, the early afternoon sunlight pouring through the window and illuminating the tiny flecks of cinnamon in the batter bowl. She'd promised herself she'd nail this recipe on the very first try, in the hopes of impressing Denise Carter, or at least proving that she was resourceful and talented in her own right. Her hands felt steady, even though her heart pounded like a jackhammer in her chest. She'd arrived home from Portland that morning with a dozen fresh sugar pumpkins tucked into the back seat, their plump forms peeking between coffee-stained boxes and a folded canvas market tote. Now, as the afternoon ticked by, she'd already peeled, diced, and roasted enough pumpkin to yield 2 cups of vibrant orange puree. The whole house smelled like autumn, a comforting blend of pumpkin, brown sugar, and a whisper of clove. Step 1. Mix dry ingredients. Riley whisked together 2 cups of unbleached all-purpose flour, a teaspoon of baking soda, a teaspoon of baking powder, a teaspoon of ground cinnamon, half a teaspoon of ground ginger, and a generous pinch of ground nutmeg and cloves. Each swipe of the whisk cracked a tiny cloud of spice into the air. Step 2. Cream, butter, and sugar. In her stand mixer, she combined half a cup of softened, unsalted butter with 3/4 of a cup of brown sugar. She let the paddle attachment spin slowly, watching the mixture lighten from a muddy caramel to a fluffy whipped cream color. Step 3. Add wet ingredients. She scraped in the pumpkin puree, followed by 2 large eggs, one at a time, making sure each was fully incorporated. A splash of pure vanilla extract joined the party, just 2 teaspoons, but it made all the difference. Step 4. Combine and fold. Riley switched back to a rubber spatula, gently folding the dry ingredients into the wet. The batter fell in thick, amber waves, flecked with glistening spices. She paused to scrape the sides of the bowl, ensuring no stray pinch of flour was left behind. When the batter was silky and smooth, she turned off the mixer, wiped the paddle clean, and admired her handiwork. It was near perfect, a fall lover's dream trapped in creamy dough. Next came Friday, or rather, Fritter Friday, at least in Riley's mind. She filled her heavy-bottomed Dutch oven with 3 inches of canola oil and set it over medium heat. A candy thermometer loitered at the edge. Its tip settled comfortably at 365 degrees Fahrenheit. She tested a single teaspoon of batter to make sure the oil didn't swallow it too quickly or foam uncontrollably. When that tiny dollop bobbed to the surface, spun once, and emerged a delicate golden brown, she slid a spoonful of batter into the hot oil. It hissed and crackled, blooming into a delightfully puffy shape. With a slotted spoon, she coaxed the fritter underwater, letting it turn slowly, then lifted it out to rest on a rack, and immediately sprinkled it with a fine dusting of cinnamon sugar. Riley arranged 15 fritters on a baking sheet lined with parchment, each one a perfect miniature cloud of autumn's sweetest spices. Her kitchen was an aromatic wonderland. It was exactly 4:30 p.m. when her phone buzzed. A text from Mason. "Hey love, I'm on my way. How's Boxwood Drive looking?" Riley tapped out a quick reply. "Operation Fritter is in full swing. See you at 5 p.m. In her head, she rehearsed the game plan. Mason would arrive, grab a quick donut, and pan the live camera to the porch where Denise would, hopefully, be waiting to sample the goods. If things went well, Denise would raise an approving brow. If she faltered, well, Riley would at least have the donuts to float on. At precisely 5 o'clock, the front door's chime jingled. Mason stepped in, his dark hair mussed from the drive. He offered a bright, "Smells amazing in here," and took a seat at the island. Riley handed him a fresh fritter. He bit in, eyes widening. "Riley, this is unreal." He swallowed. "It tastes like fall in a bite."
She grinned.
"Wait till you see the glaze." In a small saucepan, she melted a quarter cup of cream cheese with 2 tablespoons of milk, drizzled in a half cup of powdered sugar, and whisked until silky. The glaze was lumpy enough to cling to the fritters, smoothing over each spice-speckled surface. Mason carefully lifted a fritter and dipped it. The glaze ran in thick rivulets down its sides. He brought it to his lips with a flourish.
"Wow,"
he said again, as though the word could carry the full impact. Riley caught her phone, hit record, and called up the live feed. They set the dish on a platter by the front window. As the camera pointed toward the porch, Denise Carter emerged from behind a window screen, arms folded. Denise swept onto the porch and blinked at the display. 15 warm, glazed fritters sat on a rustic wooden table. The afternoon sun glinted off the glaze. She asked coolly, "What is all this?" Riley swallowed nerves and said into the camera's microphone, "Pumpkin Spice Fritters." Denise inhaled. For one suspended second, it looked like she'd turn on her heel. Instead, she lifted a single fritter and examined it with meticulous attention, almost like she was appraising an art piece. Riley's heartbeat pounded in her ears. Finally, Denise broke a piece off with a pair of kitchen shears. She brought it to her lips, paused, then chewed. Riley and Mason held their breath. Then Denise's lips quirked, just the slightest upward curve. She finished the bite, polished off the fragment, turned to Mason and said, "Tell her not bad." She glanced at Riley. A beat later, she added, "Not bad at all." The porch felt brighter. Riley sagged in relief, a flush of triumph warming her chest. Mason squeezed her hand under the table. Denise lifted another fritter and studied it. "Who taught you these?" she asked, brows raised. Riley offered, "I found a recipe, tweaked it, and practiced all week." Denise nodded once, then allowed herself a small smile. "I guess a publishing assistant can cook," she murmured. Riley laughed softly. "I hope this means you won't mind if I cook breakfast for the baby someday." Denise hesitated, then said, "We'll see about that. But this is a start." On their way out, Denise paused at the doorway. "Don't let this go to your head," she warned. "But I look forward to tasting more." Riley stumbled over her gratitude. "Thank you. That means everything." As the door clicked closed, Riley and Mason exchanged triumphant grins. Inside the kitchen, Riley's survey. The sun had barely crept over the horizon when Riley Stone eased into the loading bay of the Green Valley Co-op kitchen, her mind racing with anticipation. Today marked the culmination of every secret practice session, every late-night adaptation of recipes, and every trembling hope that her pumpkin spice fritters could become more than a one-off novelty. As she navigated past industrial stainless steel worktables and glimmering mixers, she felt the electric hum of possibility under fluorescent lights. In one corner, a young baker was kneading bowls of sourdough. In another, a preserves maker was decanting jars of blueberry jam. Riley unloaded her insulated crates, dozens of neatly stacked boxes bearing the Stone's Donuts logo, and arranged them beside her rented standalone fryer. Her first order of business was precision. She checked the fryer's temperature gauge, 365 degrees Fahrenheit, exactly as she'd tested. She scooped a generous spoonful of the velvety, spice-dappled batter into the hot oil. The instant contact sent up a sizzle so satisfying she could hardly hold back a smile. The dough puffed and turned, its edges curling golden. She fished it out, set it to drain on a wire rack, and immediately dusted it with a fine veil of cinnamon sugar. One fritter down, many more to go. Behind her station, she had lined up an array of labeled parchment-lined baskets. Classic pumpkin spice, maple walnut crunch, and brown butter sea salt. The plan was to stage 15 dozen pumpkin fritters, drizzle half with a tangy vanilla glaze, dust the rest with nutmeg-infused sugar, and package them in bright orange boxes festooned with her handwritten thank you notes. Every detail spoke of small-town charm and personal touch, elements she believed would win over the local market. By 7 a.m., Riley's crates were empty, and her first batch was cooling. The steady drone of early customers wandered in behind her, farmers delivering produce, retirees in flannel vests, young couples pushing toddlers in strollers. At precisely 8 a.m., she wheeled her portable canopy into place and snapped it securely over her folding table. A hand-lettered chalkboard sign read, "Stone's Donuts. Pumpkin Spice Fritters. $3 each, 4 for $10, 12 for $25. When the market officially opened at 8:30, a trickle of browsers became a steady flow. Riley greeted each visitor with a warm good morning, offering samples on tiny paper plates. The first woman to stop, a silver-haired gardener carrying a wicker bag, took a tentative bite and closed her eyes in delight. "This is like autumn sunshine," she declared. Riley felt her stomach flutter in relief as the woman purchased 4 fritters for her bridge club. Word spread quickly. Within an hour, a line wound past the neighboring coffee stall. Mason, who'd arrived to lend support, manned the registers with equal parts cheer and efficiency. As he bagged orders, he announced upcoming flavors: gingerbread bliss for December, peppermint cocoa swirls in winter, adding to the excitement. A local food blogger snapped photos and tagged Stone's Donuts on Instagram, causing a fresh wave of followers in the digital realm. Riley barely caught her breath between frying and packaging. Despite the whirlwind energy, not everything went smoothly. Around 10:15, a sudden gust of wind whistled down the aisle, threatening to upend her chalkboard and send flyers fluttering into the produce stalls. Riley lunged forward, holding the sign just long enough to keep it upright, but in the scramble, she bumped the fryer stand, causing a small splash of hot oil. She yanked the fryer away from the table's edge, apologizing profusely to a startled couple nearby. The husband gave her a forgiving nod, but Riley's heart thudded with panic at the near mishap. She adjusted her apron, wiped her palms on a towel, and pressed on. By midday, the sun had climbed high enough to bake the market in warmth. Riley's final batch, tucked into the last of her branded boxes, was met with applause from a trio of film students who insisted on a taste test on camera. One declared, "These would sell out on any college campus." The other 2 nodded vigorously, promising social media shoutouts. Mason leaned in with a grin. "You're on the verge of something huge, Riles," he said quietly. She took a breath, savoring the sense of pride that had nothing to do with Denise Carter's approval. Then came the breakthrough. Just as Riley was tallying her cash box, a sharply dressed man approached. He introduced himself as Brian Lawson, co-owner of Harvest Moon Cafe, a local spot known for its pastry and coffee pairings. Brian studied the empty display, then looked Riley in the eye with an expression that was both businesslike and hopeful. "I'd love to feature your pumpkin spice fritters at my cafe this fall," he said. "If you can supply us with 200 pieces per week, I'll pay up front for orders each Monday." Riley stood rooted to the spot. 200 fritters. The scale of what Brian proposed was dizzying. She'd need to triple her output, streamline her kitchen processes, and ensure consistent quality every time. But the promise of stability, an ongoing wholesale partnership, was the dream she'd been chasing. She steadied her voice. Yes. Absolutely. I'd love to." Mason punched the air behind her. and Brian shook her hand with a firm grip. They agreed to finalize details next Tuesday, handing her a business card before disappearing into the crowd. As the market wound down at 2 p.m., Riley counted her proceeds, a net profit of nearly $500 after expenses. More importantly, she held letters of interest, social media tags, and Brian's contact information. She loaded the last of her crates into Mason's truck, and they drove home under a sky streaked with afternoon clouds. Back in her kitchen, Riley unpacked supplies and wiped down surfaces. The adrenaline had faded to a satisfied warmth as she mentally mapped out next steps, reserving extra fryer space at the co-op kitchen, ordering bulk spices, and recruiting an assistant to help with packaging and deliveries. She jotted ideas in a spiral notebook: automate mixing process, research wholesale packaging discounts, schedule weekly bakery boss nights for community demos. When Mason returned from fetching lunch, a simple turkey and avocado wrap, they sat at their cozy kitchen table, surrounded by flickering votive candles and the scent of leftover pumpkin. He raised his sandwich in a mock toast.
"To Stone's Donuts," he said.
"May they spice up the world." Riley laughed, tears of exhaustion and joy pooling in her eyes. "Tomorrow," she replied, voice soft, "we start working on 200 fritters a week." Mason smiled and squeezed her hand, mindful of her baby bump. "We'll do it together." In that moment, Riley realized she'd never been more certain of anything. She had leaped into the unknown and landed on solid ground. The Carter doubts felt distant now. Her path was clear, paved with spice-scented triumphs, and leading to a future only she could shape. And as dusk settled over Green Valley, Riley Stone closed her eyes and dreamed of countless pumpkin spice fritters lined up in neat rows, each one a testament to her courage, creativity, and unwavering belief in a dream born from the simplest of ingredients. Riley Stone returned home late that Sunday afternoon, exhausted but exhilarated by the weekend's success at the market. As she carried her empty crates up the driveway, she spotted Denise Carter on the front porch, unusual. Usually, Denise retreated indoors once Mason left for the warehouse early Sunday morning. Today, she stood with an unfamiliar young woman dressed in a crisp denim apron, her dark hair pulled back into a neat ponytail. "Riley," Denise called, her tone neutral but firm. "This is Piper Holt, my niece. She'll be helping you in the kitchen starting tomorrow." Riley's chest tightened. "Helping me," she repeated, forcing a calm smile. "I appreciate the offer, but I'll manage." Denise inclined her head. "We discussed this. With the Harvest Moon Cafe order and the weekly market on Saturdays, you'll need extra hands. Piper has experience working in her family's bakery back in Portland." Piper offered a tentative wave. Her smile was polite but guarded. Riley studied Piper's poised demeanor. At 22, Piper looked almost too polished, her uniform stains conspicuously absent, her confidence bordering on arrogance. "Nice to meet you, Piper," Riley said. "I'm glad for any help making sure everyone gets their orders on time." She glanced at Denise. "Is Piper staying here, or?" "She'll bunk in the guest room," Denise replied crisply. "You'll coordinate schedules with her directly. I expect you both to get along." Denise swept back indoors. Piper followed her inside without a backward glance. Left alone on the porch, Riley felt the unmistakable flutter of unease in her stomach, half from exhaustion, half from suspicion. She forced herself to breathe deeply and remind herself Piper was family, and Denise might simply be helping despite her earlier skepticism. Still, the memory of Denise's thinly veiled approval last week kept Riley wary. The next morning, Riley arrived at the co-op kitchen at 5:45 a.m. She found Piper already there, sleeves rolled up and tying a hairnet. Piper glanced up without smiling, then returned to her work scooping flour. Riley set down her crate. "Morning," she said. "Thanks for coming early." Piper nodded curtly. "I like to get a head start." Her voice was smooth and rehearsed. Riley frowned but said nothing. She had bigger tasks to manage: proofing yeast, assembling mixing bowls, calibrating scales. By 6:15, As Riley combined pumpkin puree with eggs and spices, she noticed Piper leaning on the counter, watching her every move. Piper's dark eyes tracked Riley's hands as she measured sugar and cinnamon. When Riley turned to fetch another spice jar, she found Piper holding a small notepad and jotting furiously. Riley's throat tightened. She'd posted her recipe only on her locked phone and certainly had not shared it in writing. "Piper," Riley said, raising her voice slightly. "You okay?"
Piper glanced up, startled.
"Oh, yes, sorry. I was just watching your technique. I've only ever worked with pre-made dough back in Portland. Your spice ratios are different." She tapped the notepad. "I'm making notes, so I can learn." Riley considered pushing back but remembered Denise's insistence on extra help. "All right," she said, turning back to her bowl. "Just try not to get flour everywhere." Piper smiled briefly, but it didn't reach her eyes. Throughout the morning, Piper shadowed Riley's every move, folding batter, testing oil temperature, draining fritters. Whenever Riley paused, Piper tilted her head, took out her phone, and photographed the glossy batter or the fritters cooling on racks. Riley felt exposed and vulnerable, as if her prized recipe was under threat. By 8 a.m., they were at the market stall side by side. Riley oversaw the fryer while Piper arranged boxes and handled cash. The first dozen fritters flew off the board as customers praised the familiar spiced aroma. Piper seemed to handle sales well, charming older gentlemen and young families. Yet every few minutes, she slipped away to the edges of Riley's canopy and whipped out her phone to send rapid-fire text messages. At 10:30, a regular customer complimented Riley on her consistency. She ordered 6 fritters, and Riley bagged them with a practiced flourish. Meanwhile, Piper, who'd promised to restock, was nowhere to be found. Riley blinked, glanced at her watch. Piper had vanished. She spotted the teenager near the coffee roaster, holding her apron pocket bulged suspiciously. Riley excused herself, followed Piper through the crowd. She found Piper crouching behind a display of artisanal granola, furtively inspecting the fritters already wrapped in Harvest Moon Cafe boxes, labeled with cinnamon and leaf stickers identical to Riley's own packaging. "Piper!" Riley snapped. Piper jumped, eyes wide. She straightened abruptly, thrusting a small strawberry jam jar into her pocket. Riley crossed her arms. "What are you doing?" Piper's face flushed. I was just checking that the labels matched. I'm trying to help." Riley's voice was low and firm. "Those labels are mine. Those boxes were packed for Brian at Harvest Moon, not for retail." Piper stammered. "But I thought—" Riley interrupted. "Thought what?" "That Denise wanted you to learn enough to replicate my entire setup." Piper's shoulders slumped. She whispered, "I'm sorry. Denise said I should pay attention to everything." Anger flared in Riley's chest. "That's not my problem. You're here to assist, not to steal my work." She turned away, heart pounding. Piper's apology sounded hollow. She'd been taking notes, photos, even starting to repackage Riley's stock. Back at the stall, Riley cleared her throat. "Stay with me," she said quietly. Piper nodded, not trusting her voice. Riley completed the sale, then handed Piper a glazed fritter, saying, "Taste this. You'll understand the balance, more sugar, less clove." Piper bit and nodded slowly. For a moment, they stood side by side, sharing a silent understanding of the craft. But the truce was fragile. 2 hours later, sales began to slow, and customers expressed surprise at tiny variations in fritter texture. A father of 3 complained one batch was too dense. A barista next door noted Piper's substitution of nutmeg for cinnamon in her own test fritter tasted wrong. Riley realized that Piper had begun distributing her own fritters under the same name. Her chest tightened with betrayal. She confronted Piper at closing time. "You sold your own version?" Piper's eyes filled with tears. "I wanted to prove I could do it. Denise said she'd drop you if you couldn't keep up." Riley bit back further anger. "And you thought that was okay?" Piper shook her head. "I'm sorry." Riley squared her shoulders. "Tomorrow, you're off the schedule."
"Denise wants you, fine."
But you're no longer my assistant. Piper flinched. Please? I didn't mean to. Riley raised a hand. Save it. All night Riley stared at the shared ceiling, anger mingling with sorrow. Piper's betrayal wasn't just theft. It was confirmation of a deeper plot. Denise had installed Piper to usurp Riley's place, test her resilience. But Riley had an advantage: authenticity, passion, and the trust of her community. The next morning, Riley packed her crates alone, determined to reclaim her business's integrity. Piper watched from the porch, guilt etched on her face, but powerless to help. Riley realized that surviving this chapter would require vigilance, changing recipes, limiting access, and trusting only herself. As she drove toward the co-op kitchen, Riley resolved that no one would replace her. Every fritter she fried in the days to come would carry the undisputed stamp of Stone's Donuts. And should anyone try to steal that essence, Riley would have the strength and the proof to protect what was rightfully hers. Riley Stone rose before dawn again, her mind uneasy despite the exhaustion that weighed on her eyelids. The past week had brought so many victories: her stall at the market, the Harvest Moon Cafe order, but it had also exposed her vulnerabilities. Piper's betrayal was one thing, Denise's manipulation another. Yet nothing had prepared Riley for the ultimate shock to come. She arrived at the co-op kitchen at 5:30 a.m., as usual. The air was crisp, and a pale mist clung to the loading dock. Through the window, she saw Piper already at the fryer, methodically scooping batter. Riley's chest tightened. They had agreed Piper would no longer assist, but Denise had intervened, reassigning shifts without Riley's consent. Bristling, Riley stepped inside. Piper, she said firmly. Piper turned, eyes wide with guilt. You're not to work here today. Piper's lips quivered. Miss Stone, Denise said. Riley cut her off. I'm the owner of Stone's Donuts. You're not helping. Piper's shoulders slumped. Riley felt a fleeting pang of pity, but buried it beneath righteous anger. Find your own way out, she said, then turned to begin her solitary morning routine. Yet by 6 a.m., Riley realized she couldn't do it alone. The fryer hissed empty. She tapped her phone. Mason, she texted. Need help bad. 10 minutes later, Mason appeared, bleary-eyed but stoic. Denise called and fussed, he guessed, rinsing his hands. Riley shook her head. Just stay. We'll handle it. Together. They prepared the first batch of dough. Mason measured flour. Riley folded in pumpkin puree and spices. The aroma filled the sterile kitchen, a fleeting comfort. They filled their crates, loaded up the truck, and drove to the Green Valley Farmers Market. By 8 a.m., the stand was set, bright canopy, logo flag, neatly displayed donuts. Mason manned the register as Riley managed the fryer. A gentle buzz of gossip drifted through the early crowd. I heard Piper left. Where's Miss Stone's new assistant? Riley tuned it out. She focused on golden fritters emerging from the oil. Each crispy edge glinted like promise. But at 9:30 a.m., her world flipped. She spotted Denise Carter stepping into the crowd, arms crossed, a cold smile playing at her lips. And beside Denise walked Mason's best friend, Tom Henderson, a tall, broad-shouldered man Riley had only met once. Tom approached the stall, and Riley's relief at seeing a familiar face turned to shock when Tom offered Denise a fritter, then leaned in close to whisper. Denise's eyes widened, then narrowed. Riley's heart thudded. She took a fritter, walked toward them, and tried to keep her voice calm. Miss Carter, Tom, hello. Denise tucked a dark curl behind her ear. So good of you to join us, she said, voice laced with false warmth. I've been enjoying Piper's take on the recipe. Riley froze. Piper had been ousted. Riley realized Denise had hired Piper to pretend to leave, then bring in Tom to test Riley's vulnerability a second time. Mason appeared at her elbow. Riley gripped his arm. Mom, what are you talking about? Mason frowned. You said Piper left. Denise's nostrils flared. She did, officially. But I asked Tom to bring me some fresh fritters this morning. He knows the old recipe. She turned to Tom. Go on, Tom. Show Riley what true precision looks like. Tom's eyes gleamed. He bit into the fritter. He chewed slowly, as though savoring a rare wine, then said, Denise is right. Piper's version was weak. Miss Stone, this is a far superior fritter. Riley's blood boiled. The crowd hushed, waiting for her response. She set down the spatula she held like a weapon. Her voice shook. Tom, you're supposed to be my friend. Tom shrugged, wiping sugar from his lips. I just taste what's best. Riley looked at Denise, whose thin smile told Riley everything. She had orchestrated this to humiliate Riley publicly. Something snapped. Riley climbed onto the edge of her folding table and faced the small crowd. You want to judge my work? She called out.
Fine.
I'll do better. She grabbed her chalkboard sign, swung it around to face the crowd. Live fritter demo here. Then she hopped down. The market's murmur rose into a buzz of curiosity. Riley beckoned Tom and Denise forward. Join me, both of you. Let's fry side by side, me in my element, you two like I taught Piper. Denise bristled. I'm not here to cook. Riley's eyes flashed. Then step aside. Denise opened her mouth to protest, but the crowd's attention pinned her down. Tom hesitated, then shrugged off his jacket and rolled up his sleeves.
All right.
Let's do it. Riley led them back to the fryer. She scooped a spoonful of batter, Macy's heart pounding, while Tom followed suit, spilling half of his on the floor in his inexperience. Denise hovered with the camera on her phone, capturing every second. Riley dropped her batter in perfect puff. Tom's fritter curled lopsided. The crowd murmured their disappointment. As the three cooked, Riley narrated. Consistency means measuring by weight, not cups. Temperature must stay constant at 365 degrees Fahrenheit. And the sugar dust must be a fine, even coat. She pressed Tom's fritter with the handle of a wooden spoon. Dense, greasy.
See?
Too much batter, wrong heat. Texture ruined. Riley dipped her fritter, crisp and golden, in glaze and held it up. This is the result of respect for the craft. The crowd clapped. Denise's phone wobbled as her smirk vanished. Tom's face reddened. Riley scooped a fresh fritter and offered it to Tom. He took a nervous bite, then nodded slowly. Okay, he admitted. Your version is better. Riley turned to the crowd. If you want authentic Stone's donuts, come to me, not to copycats. Applause swelled. Denise lowered her phone. Riley hopped off the table and walked back to her stall. Mason lifted her hand. That was incredible, he whispered. She exhaled, relief and triumph washing through her. But the encounter had cost her. Her confidence had been shaken, and Denise's treachery laid bare. Back at home that night, Riley stared at her reflection in the bedroom mirror, sleeves rolled to her elbows, hands stained with sugar and oil. Her reflection showed someone changed, hardened by betrayal, yet incandescent with resolve. She touched her belly, where her unborn child fluttered a gentle kick. I will protect us, she vowed softly. Then she turned and opened her laptop. She drafted an email. Dear Brian, thank you for your patience. Stone's Donuts will happily fill your order of 200 pumpkin spice fritters every Monday morning. Freshly prepared, she typed out her plan to expand staff carefully, vet assistants rigorously, and hold live demos every market day to prove authenticity. As she hit send, her phone buzzed. A text from Denise. We need to talk. Dinner tomorrow at 6. Riley's pulse quickened. She stared at the text, her jaw set. She tapped back. I'll be there. Tomorrow she knew she'd face Denise on her own turf. But tonight, she held the evidence of her own mastery in every perfect fritter resting in the refrigerator. The betrayal had cut deep. But Riley Stone was no longer the tentative assistant who needed Denise's approval. She was an entrepreneur with a vision and a fierce determination to defend it. Tomorrow's conversation would determine if reconciliation was possible. But regardless of the outcome, Riley would no longer be replaced, no longer cast aside. She was the creator of her own destiny, and no one would derail her from the path she had earned through blood, sweat, and sugar. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and stale coffee. Riley Stone sat at the plaintiff's table, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Across the aisle, Mason Carter fidgeted with his tie, his once steady composure unraveling under the glare of overhead lights. Denise Carter glared at Riley from the gallery, arms crossed, a single strand of her silver-streaked hair escaping its bun. Piper Holt, Denise's niece, sat beside her, eyes downcast, the weight of her betrayal recently confessed but still too raw to heal. When the judge called the case, Riley rose. She wore a tailored charcoal suit, her hair pulled back to keep everything visible, no loose tendrils to betray emotion. Mason stood, face pale, as the bailiff swore them in. The judge peered over her glasses. "Miss Stone, Mr. Carter, you have petitioned for a no-fault divorce. Are you both in agreement on the terms presented?" Riley nodded, voice steady. "Yes, Your Honor." Mason's throat bobbed, but he said only yes. The judge held up a folder, skimmed its contents. "The court finds that the marriage is irretrievably broken. I hereby grant the petition for dissolution of marriage. The marriage of Riley Stone and Mason Carter is dissolved as of today's date." A hush fell. The gavel fell. In that single rap, Riley felt an unexpected weight lift from her shoulders. She closed her eyes, then opened them to see Mason staring down at the papers. Denise let out a theatrical cough, then made to rise, until the judge dismissed the court. Outside the courtroom, media photographers lined the hallway, flashbulbs popping like distant thunder. Riley kept her head high, moving past them in a straight line. Mason lingered, avoiding her gaze. A reporter's microphone thrust toward him. "Mr. Carter, any comment on your divorce?" Mason's voice cracked. "No comment." He ducked away. Riley stepped into the sunlight and inhaled. The hallway's buzz faded into background hum. She spotted Piper leaning against a pillar, her usual composure gone. Piper looked up, eyes red. Riley hesitated, then approached. Piper's mouth twitched. I'm sorry," she stammered. "I never meant it to go this far." Riley paused. She'd rehearsed what to say. "This was never about you." But hearing Piper's genuine remorse made her heart ache. She managed. "We both made choices. Learn from them." She turned and walked on, leaving Piper to her regret. Meanwhile, Mason retreated to Denise's arms. Denise patted his shoulder as though comforting a child rather than a 30-year-old man. "You'll be fine," she soothed. "Just give me a call when you need help setting up your new apartment." Mason's eyes flicked to the courthouse steps, where Riley had vanished. Denise read the look. Mason moved into a small loft above Carter Freight's warehouse. The space was stark, concrete floors, exposed beams, a single futon, and a bare kitchenette. Boxes filled the corner, each labeled. Clothes, books, mementos, items Riley had packed and labeled before moving out. Nights, Mason lay awake, the loft's high ceiling echoing his racing thoughts. He replayed the live demo in the market, watched Riley's steady hands and calm voice as she turned betrayal into demonstration. He'd underestimated her strength and overvalued his mother's approval. Now, every scuff mark on the floor reminded him of the day Riley placed 200 pumpkin spice fritters in his hands and asked for his support. He started sleeping at odd hours, daydreaming in the warehouse office, pacing at midnight over whether to fight for Riley's forgiveness or accept that he'd lost her trust forever. Denise checked in daily with calls. "Have you eaten? Are you sleeping?" But her words sounded hollow. Mason realized no amount of maternal comfort could fix what he'd broken. Back in Green Valley, Piper Holt returned to Portland after a single phone call from Denise. Her old bakery job awaited, but her reputation had preceded her. News of the copycat fritters and public unmasking had spread through social media. One afternoon, Piper walked into the family bakery to find a frosty silence. Her manager, Mr. Holt, her uncle, ushered her into the back room. "I'm sorry, Piper," he said quietly. "We can't have that reputation here. I'm afraid we have to let you go." Piper's shoulders slumped. The neighbors she once greeted with a cheery wave now crossed the street. Former friends who used to share coffee and gossip at the bakeries counter-glared or looked away. She felt the sting of 1,000 small phones capturing her mistakes. Each social media post, each comment thread, branded her betrayal. She moved back in with her mother's family home. The once cozy rooms, now shadowed by family tension. She refused to answer Denise's calls. Even Denise's apologies, laced with duty and pride, felt insincere. Piper's heart ached with regret, but she had burned too many bridges. Denise Carter returned to her habitual routine, cleaning the guest room, correcting grammar on her retired teacher blogs, and maintaining immaculate porcelain teacups in the china cabinet. Yet something was fractured. Her friends at the gardening club, once unwavering in their compliments, now avoided dinner invitations. They'd heard of her manipulations, her attempts to humiliate Riley, and they whispered behind her back about power-hungry matriarchs. At the local PDA bake sale, Denise set out store-bought cookies with a plastic label, submitted by Denise Carter. She watched proud mamas sample her goods and whisper among themselves, then discreetly replace the intriguing cookies labeled Bishop's Home Kitchen with their own. She felt their disapproval radiate like a cold draft. Her final blow came when Harvest Moon Cafe's weekly order paused. Brian Lawson's friendly email said, "Denise, I regret to inform you that we've developed our own in-house pastry. Thank you for your enthusiasm." Denise read the lines twice before the message sank in. The cafe now bypassed her entirely. Her nights grew restless. Gloves of authoritative command fell from her trembling hands. At dusk, she sat in her empty living room, the silence thick. She dialed Riley's number once, twice, then hung up. She tried Mason's number, no answer. She realized that the world she'd tried to control had slipped beyond her grasp. Riley capped her laptop and closed her bakery's digital dashboard for the day. She'd finalized the new wholesale contract to supply Harvest Moon Cafe, 300 fritters per week, plus a seasonal sorghum-glazed pumpkin loaf. Her profits had grown enough to hire 2 part-time assistants, trusted locals, not strangers brought in by Denise. She glanced at the framed crest on her office wall. Stone's Donuts, EST 2025. Beneath it, a photo of her and Mason in happier days, bright smiles, her head atop his shoulder. She remembered the promises they'd made. She could have tried more to save the marriage, but in her heart she knew some wounds ran too deep. Riley shut off the lights and walked home through Green Valley's quiet streets. Behind her, the storefronts flickered their neon signs off one by one. Street lamps cast golden halos on the sidewalks. She inhaled the crisp night air and fingered her phone in her pocket. Mason had texted earlier. "Hope you're well." She hadn't responded. At home, she slipped off her shoes, padded into the nursery painted soft pumpkin orange, and sat beside the crib. She placed her hand on the mattress, imagining the small life soon to arrive. Fear and excitement danced together in her chest. She whispered, "You'll have a mama who won't let anyone push her aside." She rose and turned out the light, then peered at the moonlight spilling across her Pumpkin Dreams mobile. Outside, Denise's house stood dark and silent. Riley felt a final twinge of sympathy for the woman who had tried to break her, whose own world lay empty now. But Riley had moved forward, choosing integrity over approval, passion over placation. Tomorrow, she would check on her assistants, finalize the bakery expansion plan, and attend her prenatal appointment. In every challenge, she found proof of her resilience and faith in her own abilities. The Carter name no longer carried power over her destiny. Stone's Donuts was her legacy, and she would build on it, brick by sugar-dusted brick, for herself and for her child. In the end, divorce had brought loss and upheaval for all involved. Mason's shattered illusions, Piper's ruined reputation, Denise's faded influence. But from those ashes, Riley rose stronger, her dream intact, her future wide open, and her spirit unbreakable. Riley Stone awoke one crisp spring morning to the distant hum of delivery trucks on Main Street and the sweet promise of sunlight spilling across her front porch. The air held the faintest trace of pumpkin and yeast, a reminder of the craft she had built from scratch. As she stepped outside, she inhaled deeply, savoring the sensation of possibility. Today, she would visit the new Stone's Donuts flagship storefront, a space she had dreamed of and planned for since the first day her market stall had sold out on a drizzly October morning. Walking down Green Valley's tree-lined avenue, Riley passed the old bakery building that once housed the co-op kitchen. It now stood empty, its windows dark. But a block away, at 142 Oakwood Avenue, a fresh sign arched over sparkling glass doors, Stone's Donuts. Beneath the logo, a tagline read, "Where every bite is home." Riley's heart fluttered as she reached the entrance. Pushing through the door, she was greeted by the gentle chime of a golden bell. The interior was bright and warm, reclaimed oak floors, walls painted in soft cream with accents of pumpkin and cinnamon, and pendant lights dangling over a long display case brimming with rows of perfectly spiced fritters. Behind the counter, her two trusted assistants, Sophia, a stay-at-home mom with an eye for packaging design, and Jamal, a culinary school graduate she'd mentored, worked in seamless rhythm. Sophia carefully placed a dozen fritters into each branded box, while Jamal frosted the final batch of maple walnut crunch with a rich glaze. "Good morning, Riley," Sophia called cheerfully, wiping her hands on her apron. "We've got the pre-orders ready, and the case is full." "And the community baking class sign-ups went live at midnight," Jamal added. "We already have 20 people registered for Saturday." Riley felt a swell of pride. She ran a hand along the smooth wood of the counter and replied, "You two are incredible."
Thank you.
She looked out at the small crowd gathered at the coffee station, a pickup area where local patrons sipped lattes and waited for their donuts. Children pressed their faces to the display glass, eyes wide at the sugar-glazed treasures. A barista from Harvest Moon Cafe stood at the espresso machine, preparing a custom Stone's special latte with a pumpkin spice syrup swirl. "Cappuccino for Mrs. Martinez," the young barista announced, nodding toward a silver-haired woman waiting near the window. Riley recognized Mrs. Martinez as the first customer to ever praise her fritters at the farmer's market. Mrs. Martinez took her cappuccino and a pumpkin classic fritter with a grateful smile. "You did it, dear," she said softly. "You made it." Riley glanced around at the flourishing scene. Neighborhoods from Salem to Portland were now regulars, delivery drivers lined up for wholesale orders, and social media buzzed with fresh #Stone's Donuts posts. But beyond the numbers, she saw something more precious, the genuine delight this little shop brought to people's mornings, the sense of community it fostered. After the morning rush, Riley retreated to her modest office tucked behind the kitchen. On her desk lay a stack of congratulatory letters. One from a local high school thanking her for sponsoring their baking club, another from the Chamber of Commerce nominating Stone's Donuts for Small Business of the Year, and an unexpected card from Piper Holt, apologizing again and wishing Riley well. Riley read Piper's heartfelt lines, paused, then set the card in a drawer, an acknowledgement of Piper's growth, but no opening for reconciliation just yet. Next, Riley reviewed the week's production schedule. Harvest Moon would need 300 fritters Monday morning, and a nearby corporate campus had requested a Friday corporate box of gourmet fritters for their spring fundraiser. She mapped out staffing. Mason's former colleague Alex, after hearing of Riley's success, offered to drive the wholesale deliveries once a week. Mason himself, no longer tethered to his mother's strictures, had found stability as a part-time logistics coordinator, helping Riley optimize her supply chain. His quiet support, expressed in nightly texts and weekend meetings with the pastry team, reminded Riley that some relationships deserved space to heal and redefine. That afternoon, Riley prepared for her first community baking class. She had transformed the former back hallway into a demonstration kitchen, complete with a long marble countertop and adjustable stools. The sign-ups read, "Learn the art of the perfect pumpkin spice fritter." As participants arrived, couples, college students, retirees, Riley welcomed them warmly. She demonstrated the precise spoon technique for measuring batter, the critical eye for oil temperature, and the gentle tuck-and-fold motion that created uniform puffs. Each student took a turn at the fryer station, amazed at how delicate technique transformed simple ingredients into golden delights. After the class, Riley stood in the empty kitchen, wiping down counters as the sun dipped toward the horizon. Exhaustion tugged at her limbs, but her spirit soared. She packed up her instructor's kit and walked home under a sky tinted with rose and lavender. Along the way, she passed the Carter house. From the porch, Denise emerged, clasping a potted mum in her hands, autumn-colored petals nodding in the evening breeze. Riley slowed. Denise approached, eyes softened. "Riley," she began, voice quieter than Riley had heard in years. I saw what you've done. Your shop, it's beautiful. You've built something real." Riley's pulse fluttered, torn between the urge to shudder herself away and the conviction of what she'd earned.
She stopped on the sidewalk.
"Thank you," she said simply. Denise nodded. "I made mistakes. I hope you'll accept this." She extended the potted mum. Riley took it, surprised. "This is lovely. Thank you." Their eyes met in a moment of fragile understanding, no promises, but mutual respect for what Riley had become. A block away, Mason waited, watching from the driver's seat of his car. He rolled down the window. "All set," he called. Riley smiled and slid into the passenger seat, tucking the mum beside her. She turned to look at Denise's house one last time. The porch light glowed warmly, and though the house remained empty of Riley's dreams, it had played its role in forging her path. "Ready for dinner?" Mason asked. Riley nodded. As they drove off, the lights of Stone's Donuts winked behind them, a beacon of hope, resilience, and fresh starts. That night, Riley sat at her kitchen table, the new mum perched on the windowsill. She thought of her unborn child, the house she would fill with laughter, and the shop still humming with promise. She raised her mug of chamomile tea in a quiet toast to the courage of letting go, the power of reinvention, and the joy of building something that no betrayal, no doubt, could ever unmake. Stone's Donuts was more than a bakery. It was a testament to a woman who refused to be defined by others' expectations or betrayals, who took ashes of heartbreak and kindled them into an enduring flame. And as Riley closed her eyes, a content smile played on her lips, knowing the sweetest victories were those she had earned herself. And that brings us to the end of today's story on TrueStory Vibes. Don't forget to leave a comment with a quote or moment that touched you the most. Your words give our team the motivation to keep creating more heartfelt stories. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon.